Okay, a couple things before we get started on the actual class. So today is the last day of third quarter.
Is it actually? Wait, do grades go back up to 100?
So today's the last day of the third quarter.
No, that's true. Wait, don't they actually?
No.
No, like,
That's for semester. Evan, that's semester. That's not quarter.
Right. So you will be getting a grade for your research paper outline that you handed in. Basically, the way I grade that is how much effort did you put into it, how much work did you put into it. So that grade will be going in. Also, we're going to be talking about restoration today. We're going to be talking about art restoration. We may actually have a full class on that. If you want to do something else, to boost your grade to do something else, you can tonight. So if you want to, before midnight tonight, pass me in an essay. Doesn't have to be long. Like 5 paragraphs, 4 or 5 paragraphs, something like that. This. So basically you're going to be looking at these questions. This is optional. You can do it if you want. If you don't have time and your grade is fine and you're happy with your grade the way it is, that's fine.
Is it opinionated or do you want?
Opinionated. Apply your opinion. So take a look at these.
It's like an extra credit thing?
Yeah, basically. It's if you want it. Okay? So basically looking at these, what should be the purpose of restoration? Is it necessary or good to return an artwork to an original state? When is it not a good idea to restore something? And then apply your opinion to the Chartres restoration, which we'll be talking about today. Okay?
What is restoration? We're putting it like refixing it.
Yeah, so that's basically your handout. That's the paper from the New York Times. That's the article from the New York Times. We'll be talking about that as we go through. Okay? Yeah.
Will you have graded our outlines by tonight?
Uh-huh.
So we'll know what our grade is?
Uh-huh. Or at the very least by tomorrow. I think Mrs. Gray's, so the quarter ends today. So basically any work that's in is in. Whatever's in is in. I think she gives us until like, us teachers till like Tuesday, Wednesday to fill them in. So I'm going to try to get it all in there. Yeah.
So this will get in there. This will be added to the...
Yeah, even if I don't, like if you hand it in by midnight, obviously I'm not going to grade it tonight, but I'll have it in by early next week. Okay. And again, you really can't do, if you want to do this, you really can't do badly on it unless you're just totally like, restoration's dumb, cool, I don't care, and you just hand me in a bunch of crap. Yeah, I'll give you a 30 on it, and that'll tank your grade. So.
Oh, it can ruin your grade?
Yeah, it's homework. It's optional homework, but you have to do a decent job. Chartres. Okay. All right, so Chartres is interesting for a couple different reasons. It's a masterpiece of early to high Gothic architecture. It has different sections that are composed at different times, so art historians love this. There's a lot about it that was interesting, unique, and makes it one of the more exceptional pieces of architecture in the Gothic style.
Wait, does that have to be said tonight or tomorrow?
Tonight. So if you don't have time tonight, you don't have to worry about it, right? This is not, you have to do it, okay? All right, so what makes Chartres special? What was it about? So Chartres Cathedral, its official name is called Our Lady of Chartres, and Chartres is a town. That's where it gets its name. It's a town in France. So what makes Chartres special? Even before this Gothic cathedral was built, Chartres was a place of pilgrimage.
The cathedral's called Our Lady of Chartres?
Mm-hmm. The main focus for the devotion of pilgrims was this. This is a well that is still there in the crypt today. It goes very deep. It was said to have, there's no documented cases of this, but it was said by the local people to have miraculous healing powers. Did it actually? We don't know. Okay? But it was a source of pilgrimage. It was a source of devotion for a lot of people in the area. It wasn't a big place of pilgrimage like Santiago de Compostela or like Jerusalem or Rome or something like that, but it was enough to bring some people in. So Chartres was kind of this place. It was this shrine. People would come to this well and they would pray.
No water left?
Huh?
No water left?
There is. It's just very deep. Okay?
Why do they dig that deep out there?
Where's ground?
Lots of work. So we're essentially below ground level right now, here.
Yeah.
Who took the picture?
Me.
Cool.
Wait,
Yeah.
really? You did that?
Yeah.
You had like in a harness?
Well, I leaned over the edge, but there's that grate there because I don't want people throwing stuff in.
That takes
We're
time.
falling in that.
Yeah.
Or that.
All right, so this was a place of pilgrimage. Another thing that makes Chartres special is that it has been the place of devotion. Again, with some of these very early relics, we don't have provenance. We don't have a lot of history for them. So we always like to say it is piously believed that this is the place where the relic of Our Lady is, that is the veil or the tunic of Our Lady. Is it actually hers? Maybe, probably, we don't know. It has been there for 1,000 years, over 1,000 years. At the very least, this was a relic of a holy woman. Maybe it was Our Lady, maybe it's not, but it is piously believed that it is Our Lady's. Again, we don't have documentation, we don't know.
How do they know like relics are actually someone?
Yeah, it's a big matter of debate, especially for these very early ones. How do you say that this is the veil of Our Lady or not? There's no way to do testing on it. There's, all scientists have done testing on it, and they said, yes, it is Middle Eastern. Yes, it is from about the time. Is it actually Our Lady's? I don't know. But it's one of those things where if the church says, we're going to put it in a church, they're never going to say, this is it. They're never going to come out and say, yes, 100% absolutely, because they can't. They don't know. But it's one of those things where if you go to this place and you pray to Our Lady in front of it, does it matter if you're praying in front of the actual veil of Our Lady or in front of, right? Again, this isn't an idol. We don't worship idols. So if you're praying to Our Lady with devotion and you want to gain her intercession, okay.
It's not like on the
It
on
works.
The altar, it's just like
It's in a side chapel. It's one of those little side chapels. So these two things made it a place of pilgrimage. How did the veil make its way there? We don't really know. There's lots of stories. They've tried to kind of trace it back as best they can. In 1194, so Chartres, as we'll talk about, has gone through a series of fires, has been destroyed a couple different times, and both times the veil has been rescued from the cathedral. So it is
Like this hasn't burned or someone took it out.
Someone took it out. So it has been a real relic. It's been a real draw for people to come to Chartres. Again, is it hers? We don't know. But the people of Chartres desperately believe it is, and they are very, very proud of it. The other thing that makes Chartres special, so those are the two non-architectural things. That's why there's a cathedral there. It's this well and it's this veil of Our Lady. What else makes Chartres special? It's impressive stonework. So from an architectural standpoint, the stonework is extraordinary,
Yeah,
right?
it's
Do
really
you think that?
Uh-huh.
Windows.
The carving, the stonework, all the detail that goes into it, and we'll see much more of it as we go through. The second thing that makes it, here's more depictions of some of the stonework in some of the entrances. And we'll be looking at these more.
Is that an entrance?
Yeah,
That is so pretty.
one of them.
How do you even do
Is
that?
that like a side or the main one?
That's one of the side ones.
That's lime.
That's a side. What's the main one look like?
Yeah, you'll see.
What kind of
Uh,
stone is that? Doesn't even look like stone.
It's limestone or sandstone or something.
It's just sandstone.
Yeah, it's all very
It's
bright.
easy to like chip away.
Yeah, it's not like granite. It's easier to carve. And
Yeah,
so we'll.
like, what if a person went by like just hit it?
Uh-huh. It happened.
Yeah, that's normal. You
It has happened. So we'll look at that. We'll see. The second thing from an architectural stand, huh?
Is that a door or is that
Yeah, it's a door.
Why does everyone have earbuds in?
Because they were listening to one of the tour guides talk.
Oh.
The second thing that makes
Oh my gosh.
this extraordinary is this is probably the best example, or one of the best examples. This and Notre Dame in Paris are are basically probably the two best examples of early Gothic medieval stained glass. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. All right, so the town of Chartres, it's pretty close to Paris, just a little bit southwest. Every year there's a pilgrimage between Chartres and Paris that goes through. It's 70 miles of walking. If you guys want to do it, it's fantastic. I've done it twice. It's hard, it's difficult. You're hurting. You can barely walk.
You're hurting.
Do you do the 70 miles in like 2 days?
3 days.
Would you say 70 miles?
Mm-hmm. So 70 miles over 3 days. This is usually put, yes,
Is the crypt the well?
the well is in the crypt.
What's the crypt?
We'll talk about it.
Oh.
I would highly encourage you guys to do this
What?
at some point. Do this pilgrimage, do the 70-mile pilgrimage. So traditional Catholics do this pilgrimage. It's a pilgrimage for tradition, right? Basically, it's a way of praying and honoring and praying for the full restoration of tradition. It's a great way of doing it. This started, by the way, as a pilgrimage from Paris to Chartres. So most traditional Catholic groups, basically everyone except the Society of St. Pius X, go from Paris to Chartres. Society of St. Pius X people said, we want to join you, and they said, no, you can't, you're schismatic. So SSPX people said, fine, we'll do it the same exact time, but we'll just go from Chartres to Paris. So there's 2 pilgrimages. It's silly, it's dumb, I wish they did it all together. Whichever way you want to join, I don't care.
Which way did you go?
So I was a chaperone for an SSPX young adult group, so I went with them. But it's beautiful, right?
Is it more satisfying to go from Paris to Chartres because like
Yes,
your whole
that's the whole point, right? Because you're walking towards this cathedral.
not
But
away from it.
you don't go to the cathedral for Notre Paris?
No,
You're
you
not
start
in
you start in
Paris?
Paris and then you start in Paris and then you go to Chartres.
Oh.
Wait, so what do you walk towards if you go to Chartres to Paris?
Just towards another outdoor chapel that they have set up, which
And-
Okay.
So what about, do you guys like bring your own food on these pilgrimages?
we'll talk more about that. I'll give you more. Basically, you go shopping ahead of time. You bring some snacks. They provide lunch. Lunch is a piece of bread and some Nutella, maybe, or something.
How does that give you enough energy to go?
Nutella's crazy.
You go and buy a bunch of stuff.
Oh, that makes sense.
So you carry some salamis in your backpack or something.
Fries.
Wait,
Yep.
do you
And then they provide dinner
do
for
you
you.
shop in the country or do you bring it over on a plane?
No, you shop here.
I love that. That's so cute.
That is
Right.
What would you get? What did you get?
Like a lot of tinned food,
Candy.
some cheeses, meats.
Jesus meats?
Cheeses, meats.
Oh.
So they give you bread. So they give you bread when you stop for lunch, and then you could just add on cheese, meat, stuff like that.
was awesome.
Oh my cheese.
That was awesome.
Jesus meats.
Jesus meats.
It's
Holy meats.
The town of Chartres is beautiful, especially the old town right nearby the cathedral. Again, it's not a very big town, but it's one of those idyllic, beautiful French countryside towns. Go sometime. I highly recommend you go. But seriously, like go. The SSPX group has one. The fraternity group has one. Join up. Find it. Just Google search it. Pilgrimage for Tradition Chartres. You'll find it.
Is there not one which is better?
Take time, right? This is it. It usually goes right up to Pentecost, so it goes up to Pentecost Sunday, whenever that is. So plan ahead. Do it. It's fantastic. It's muddy. It's awful. It's great.
Yeah, it's awful. It's great.
I can show you some more pictures later if we get through this. Yeah.
You look ridiculous.
Is there not one? Is there not one group that is worse? Because you said like they both don't go together.
Depends on what your affiliation is. What chapel do you go to? So that's the group you should probably join. But you can do whatever you'd like. Okay. So the town of Chartres, as you can tell, it's not a very big town, and the cathedral just overwhelms the whole town. Okay. It's similar to most other bishoprics, though, similar to most other dioceses where this was where the bishop lived. This is a cathedral. And so this basically serviced the rural area. So this is kind of how a medieval town looked, right, in France at the time. This is pretty well preserved, obviously, except for the outskirts and the suburban areas. Those smaller houses wouldn't be there. There's no wall around Chartres. At least there's not anymore. Maybe there was before, I'm not sure. But as you can see, the cathedral is just the dominating presence in the town, right? This is the way that Catholic civilization looked.
What are the white things? Are those houses, apartments?
Yeah.
Is it like the one of the pyramids looks so unfinished? I don't know. It's just to me.
Yep, we'll talk about that.
Is
By the way, that's the pilgrimage route, leaving Chartres, right? So the French countryside, right, is absolutely beautiful.
That's so great.
Yeah.
They have you to walk over?
Anyone know what those plants are?
Daffodils.
You cook with it.
Poppy?
Honeysuckle.
No,
Dill.
no.
Dandelions.
Canola.
Canola. Oil.
Canola. I didn't know
That's
that was
canola.
flowers.
Did you steal some on the way?
Yeah, it tastes nasty. I tried it. I think they get it from the roots, seeds. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how they. But it's all canola, right? So there's lots of that around, and that's just all wild. All right. So what does the exterior look like? There have always been cathedrals at Chartres. At least 5 cathedrals have started on the site, starting in the 4th century. That's when we have the first records of Our Lady's Veil being there, from the 4th century. Beyond that, we don't really know. Yeah. Each cathedral replaced an earlier building damaged by war or fire. We have the crypt in the standing cathedral now. That has been there basically since the early 1000s. Okay, so in the early 1000s, we have a few different fires happening and going on. Okay, you can see the back side of it, all the flying buttresses. That was the American chapter. There's all different nationality groups that are walking. But you can see these flying buttresses, right? So these are actual just buttresses, right? Just leading right up to it. These are the flying buttresses. So you can see they haven't really fully developed, like we'll see later in Notre Dame and other later cathedrals. Not all of the buttresses are these freestanding buttresses with the flying buttresses in between. Only a few of them up in the tower are.
Was it cold when you went?
Yeah, pretty chilly. Even if it's in May, early June in France, it's northern France and it's chilly.
Really?
Mm-hmm. It's 40s, 50s in the morning.
Do you bring a suitcase or you put all the backpack right?
It's all in a backpack. So you put it all on a truck. You can put your main backpack on a truck, and then they'll take it to the spot where you're going to sleep, and then you go and grab it.
Sweet.
So
You get like one of those,
it's well organized.
you get those like writing suitcases.
Yeah, I wouldn't, because you're walking through grass. Okay. Okay. So just another view of the back, another view of the exterior. You can see you can see the stained glass windows from the inside. You can see the flying buttresses and then the other buttresses. Okay. So what do we have going on? We have this cathedral that was built in the 1000s. It was a fairly simple one, Romanesque style. On the night of July 10th, 1194, we have another 4th fire that devastated the cathedral.
I knew it.
Only the crypt, the towers, so only the crypt and basically this area right here, this front facade, and some of these towers, some of the towers in the back, but basically everything else was destroyed, basically except for this freestanding wall. Right?
But you made it out of stone. How does it burn?
So the high heat will basically turn the mortar back into sand, essentially, and it just makes it crumbly, and then the stones fall, right? Or the stones will crack, right, because of the high heat. Or we have situations like what happened with Notre Dame in Paris, where the roof was made out of lead, that's starting to melt, and then things are just falling, and that's just collapsing the walls, right? Once one thing starts to come down, no, we don't know.
The roof was made out of lead?
In Notre Dame.
Isn't that poisonous?
Yep. Yeah, but it's very soft, so you can pound it into sheets very easily.
Yeah, but like still.
Yeah, they didn't know that back then.
Jeez.
They didn't know.
You think they would replace it though by like modern day? Is that what that went down like 2020, something like that, 2019?
Uh-huh.
So like, why did they replace it? It was like something else. Gotcha.
But it's not like people are.
Should you restore in exactly the same way?
Poisonous.
Right. So maybe you take precautions, right? That's the big debate.
You're not like, it's like,
Right.
Yeah,
It's not like
it's not like
people are
you're
going up there
jumping
licking
up
it.
to the ceiling.
So what they do now when they rebuild?
Bro,
it?
who
Yeah.
touched the ceiling? I'd love to look.
It depends. It depends on the opinion of the people who are doing it.
What do we do to Notre Dame?
They're going to restore it the same way.
Into lead?
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Really?
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That seems poisonous, but okay.
All right. So there was this huge fire.
Build your research.
Only the crypt, the towers, etc., were kept. So basically, just that front box area, which will be important when we come back to it. There was a legate of the Pope, a representative of the Pope, who happened to be in Chartres at the time of the fire and spread the word. Normally, rebuilding a cathedral takes hundreds of years, right? It takes a long time to build one of these things. But because of the devotion of the people, because of the relic of Our Lady that was there, because the legate of the Pope was there, and he said, hey, all of Christendom, we need to help restore this. We need to help restore this for Our Lady. Funds started pouring in, and the cathedral was rebuilt at an extraordinary rate. So funds were collected from royal and noble patrons around Europe, small donations from ordinary people. Reconstruction began almost immediately. So from 1194 to 1220, essentially what you see today was done. 35 years, which is 36 years, which was really extraordinary at the time, right? The nave, the aisles, and the transepts were probably completed first, and then the choir and the chapels, then the upper parts of the transept. But again, by 1220, the roof was in place, and it was really, really extraordinarily well done. Now, they didn't finish everything on time. There were still some things that were left unfinished. So basically, they completed up to about here in 1220. And then pretty quickly right afterwards, they finished this tower, and this one was still left undone because it still takes time. You don't really have to have a bell tower to have a church. The roof's in place, you can use the church, it's done, right? And that happens all the time, right? There's going to be additions and changes and things being made as time goes along. So what you see now was essentially what was done then. It was formally reconsecrated in 1260, although people started using it again in 1220. But basically what you're seeing here was done. Everything that you're seeing was done at about 1220, in about the 13th century, except for Maria's favorite left tower, right? The north spire. So the north spire, that wasn't completed, and so they refinished it a little bit later, which is why it's in a totally different style. They said, oh, well, there's this new flamboyant Gothic architecture that's all the craze around Europe. Let's do it that way. Why didn't they want to match it? I don't know. Yeah. The OCD part of me is like, you should have matched it. They didn't. So they said, maybe it was a bit of, hey, we want to do better than our grandparents did. Let's build it this way. But it does provide this really distinctive look where these two towers look very, very different. The cathedral actually was never finished as it was intended. There were supposed to be 2 more additional spires over the transept, 1 more over the apse, and then a larger one right over the crossing, right in the middle of the church. So there were supposed to be 9 total spires, but only 2 were ever finished.
How much scaffolding was there? They have crazy stuff.
A lot of scaffolding. Yeah, and you're basically attaching the scaffolding to parts of the building as you're moving up, similar to how we do it today. So here's more views. This is a view of the south spire.
Can you go in there? So like those like...
You can't go all the way up. So that's the view of the south spire, and then that's a view of the north spire. You can see it's very different.
That one's so pretty.
So extensive.
Right? It's pretty impressive.
How did they even do that?
So they were built at different times. So the south tower was built first from 1144 to 1150. Again, that's classic Gothic, and then the north tower was started just after the south tower, but again, it wasn't done until 1513. We're squarely in the flamboyant style at this point. So again, art historians really love this. Like, all right, this is this era, this is this era, same building. We don't have to travel to study different things. All right, so that's why it was done. The cathedral has 3 great facades. So facades, front spots, basically front openings. Each one is equipped with 3 portals opening into the nave from the west and the transepts from north and south. So basically you've got this entryway into the church, and then there's 1 door, another door, and a 3rd door. And then each one has these designs, or actually it's more like that. So there's all these carvings. So that's what you're looking at. You're looking at a detail of one of the carvings. So you're looking at this middle section of the west royal portal, so the Portal Royal, or the royal portal. Now this is a picture of it before it was restored. Okay? It's sandstone. There's lots of wind, there's lots of rain, there's hail, right? So some of the things are going to get damaged. That's why the face of Christ standing in majesty doesn't look as complex as he should, right? Looks like he's just kind of wiped off. Well, this was one of the original elements, one of the few elements to survive from the mid-12th century church. It was integrated into the new cathedral, so they basically took it down and they put it back up. But again, over time, it's disintegrated even more. And so they restored it. In the early 2010s, they restored this portal.
Oh,
Right? So they're basically looking at original drawings that existed from before erosion and before time basically took its toll on it, and they said, we're going to restore it. Right?
They just basically wipe it out.
It's different though, isn't it?
So they're adding on pieces to restore it to what it originally was. Right? So should they? Should they have done that? Should they have not?
Wait, do what's again?
Should they have restored it? Right? Because if you go back,
Yeah, it's different.
I think yes, they should
Right.
have restored it.
Like you go back.
They should have made it the same. They totally
Yeah, it's
changed it.
different.
I mean, It is the
Well,
same.
it is the same, it's just bigger.
It's just all the details gone. That's what it originally looked like.
Wait, Poseidon, are those like those animals, Pegasus or whatever those are? Were those there in the original one?
So maybe this is slightly.
It's a lot different.
It is a lot different. Right.
Like the
What's so
idea
bad
is the
about it?
same, but all of these.
Wait, and
So
that's
it's-
the four
it's
advantages,
totally
that's
changed.
cool. Four advantages, back to my cookie jump.
Okay.
That is dope.
Oh,
So this is the full. This is the full front entrance, right? So this is the west side of the church. This is your main entrance going into the church.
You're so clever, man.
With all of this carving, all this carving. Again, we're still not totally naturalistic in our carvings and our sculptures, right? All the figures are very much elongated, right? We don't really care to make them look perfectly realistic. Well, they're part of a column, so yeah, we're going to stretch them out, right? That's very, very medieval, early Gothic
Also personality.
style.
You know,
Right, right. Mm-hmm.
What is that? Is that just like concrete right there, the front sidewalk, or is that like the,
All this?
Right there.
That's stone, flagstones. So you can see how many people have walked over it over time.
Is that actually why?
Uh-huh.
That's crazy.
Because that's been there for about 1,000 years.
That is so cool.
Yeah,
Maybe we'll-
right? That's just people walking on it.
What?
That's why it's a dent.
the divot.
No way.
The difference?
That's not like a driving thing for like
That's just people walking on it.
What?
The difference in the height.
Well, I thought it was like for rain. The sidewalk.
Oh, that's not just, they didn't do that on purpose?
No.
Dang.
Wait, the sidewalk?
That's the best.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was like if you're wait. Like if you're in a stroller or something like that.
Wait, did
No.
they do this on purpose?
Or like if you're in a wheelchair or like
Yeah.
it's raining.
Oh, they didn't care about ADA accessibility back then. No one cares,
You gotta look up the
right? So see, in most of these churches, they'll add ramps. That's a wooden ramp that they've added.
That guy seems to have
Okay. All right, so the exterior stonework, we've already talked about this, right? There's all of these figures of saints, of evangelists, of apostles, etc., all throughout.
What's up, Danny? Hi.
On the north portal, we've talked about this a little bit before. The north portal, what are we going to be depicting? We're going to be depicting, mostly in most churches, we're going to be depicting the north, on the north side, we're going to be depicting Old Testament, right? Looking into the darkness, right? Especially in the northern hemisphere, the sun is on the south, so we're looking into the darkness. We're depicting the Old Testament. Here's the portal from the New Testament. It does show Our Lady in glory, but all the other figures, so it shows her dormition, it shows her death, her dormition, and then her ascension into heaven. But all the rest of the figures, huh?
Thought she didn't die.
Any sense?
Yeah, that's it.
Up for debate, right? We don't know if she died or if she slept. We don't know. But all the figures, all the other figures on the north portal are Old Testament figures. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Right? Why they're Old Testament figures. Then we move to the south portal. The south portal is all New Testament figures. So first we have depictions of Saint Joseph and Saint Anne. Other depictions of New Testament martyrs and confessors, all throughout the north portal or south portal. More depictions of confessors and saints.
They're so pretty.
So everyone on the south side is New Testament, everyone on the north side is Old Testament, prophets, etc.
This doesn't make any sense to me because like how do they not mess up and how do they restore like do they glue a piece back on the
Yeah, so they'll basically just kind of carve out the section and carefully recreate it. It's intense. It's really intense. All right, so how do you do that? Here's just a drawing showing the complexity and the detail. This is showing the south side.
Is the main entrance between the two piers or the?
Yeah, main entrance is over here.
Okay.
And then that's the south portal.
Labyrinth?
South is always the front.
The west is always the front.
So is it, just like out of curiosity, Our Lady Sorrows, like how many times bigger would that be than Our Lady Sorrows?
8 to 10 times.
What?
It's big. It's really big. Mm-hmm.
Some people can't fit
So
inside.
a million, like 1,000 plus, couple
Uh-huh.
thousand
Not that much.
inside.
Yeah. So we don't have a very large transept. It's mostly just the nave, and then these are these little apsidial chapels, right? This is where the veil of Our Lady is kept. It's in here.
What's the thingy on the top?
Here. That's just going into the bishop's residence.
Oh, that's cool.
Okay.
He goes right to the church.
Mm-hmm. right? So again, that's now looking in the back.
Castle.
This is an older section that was saved by the fire. So it was originally the bishop's residence. Now it's just used for sacristy, administrative offices, that kind of stuff.
Is the roof purposely green or is it?
It's copper, so it's oxidized. Hmm.
That's dope.
That's
Got a
cool.
wax on, wax
Is it an
off.
angel? Is that an angel in the very top?
I think so.
Don't Mormons have that on top of their temples? The angel?
Yeah. It's not the same one though.
I love the bush.
Theirs
Like,
like has a
that's
trumpet or something.
No.
All right, so let's go inside the windows. The majority of the windows were installed during major construction, but there's 4 lancets, 4 windows. So this is called a lancet window because it kind of looks like a spear. There's 4 windows that were saved that didn't basically die in the original fire. Because how does a window burn? Well, again, all these little pieces of metal caning, right? The stuff between the window panes, that's lead. It melts, right? So then the windows just fall out and shatter. So some of the windows did survive. And the intriguing thing about this is the most famous of these windows is called the Blue Madonna or the Belvedere, right? This is what's commonly referred to as Chartres blue or Chartres blue glass. They have, unlike Roman concrete where we figured out how to recreate Roman concrete, they have still not figured out how to recreate that really dark, almost purple shade of blue in that stained glass. They don't know what they used.
Very cool.
Wait, only for stained glass?
Yeah, so we've done,
Well,
we've
while you're riding
tested
a
it,
blue,
we've
that's
tried
what
it, can't do it, right? Can't recreate it. So we don't know what formula, what method. They must have done something that we just can't think about yet or we haven't thought about yet.
That's the only thing in the world that has that color in stained glass.
Yeah, one of a few. There's a couple other Gothic churches that have that as well.
That's really pretty color.
Would agree from like where you're, if you're standing on like ground level, you wouldn't be able to see
All of
what's
that detail.
actually on the stained glass, would you?
No, not really.
Images?
Not really. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Sorry, so it's that purple color that we can't find?
Mm-hmm.
Can't we?
That's your color, just like them.
It is. I love it.
Can't
That's
say.
it's, yeah.
So these are just some views as we're going up from bottom to top, just showing scenes. These are showing scenes of the life of Our Lady, of life from the Gospel, and then it gets up to Mary enthroned.
Patience to even put that on.
Right.
This is random, but do they allow you to take your phone in and stuff?
Uh-huh. Yeah. You can take any pictures you want. No, not this one. I wasn't able to, because someone was standing on a scaffolding to get this exact photo at this angle. I wasn't allowed to.
Yeah, they're grown.
That's cool you were there at the exact moment that they did.
But as we move to some of the other windows, so these were windows that were done later, and you can see that the blue is lighter, right? It's not as deep, not as stuff.
But so rich.
But we have a lot of other
The
windows,
circle one is so pretty.
right? These rose windows over the entrances.
Holy shit.
Oh shoot!
Their rose window is so pretty.
$7.
I'm
If only
jelly.
we could have one.
So this is from the south transept rose window, right? So you can see how they, right? The original glass is just kind of this lighter tan color, and then they're painting it, and then they insert it, right? So that's how they do the shading, etc. Okay.
Oh.
And then this is the very back of the apse chapel.
So that's just an app.
Yeah, so this is an apse
Like
chapel.
the
Now,
altar's so plain.
this is not the main altar. This is not the high altar, right? This is just one of the chapels in the back. Now, when you go to a chapel like this, when you go to Chartres or Notre Dame or right any of these larger chapels, they're kind of like museums, right? There's a lot of people doing tours. There's a lot of people visiting. People are talking, etc. That's kind of normal. That's kind of what happens, right? And so, but it is still a Catholic church.
Yeah, do you think
So,
it's wrong?
so yeah, no, people don't know, right? They try to keep it quiet. They try to, give you some guidelines on how to act. Most people don't do it. Yeah.
Wait, so from the top, would that be like a rib vault, or would it have to have more?
Yep.
Would it have to be connected?
That's a rib groin vault. So it's all going up here and they're meeting here. That's just to support the apsidial chapel. Max?
Do they keep the Blessed Sacrament in all of them?
No, just in this one. So that's what I was going to say. So when you go into a chapel like that, they will usually set aside one of the smaller chapels off to the side for the Blessed Sacrament. The Blessed Sacrament will repose there.
You know, it's allowed in there, like,
Right. So in the larger churches like St. Peter's, they will have one chapel that's always there, and usually they'll have the Blessed Sacrament exposed in a monstrance. And so there will be a grate in front of it, there will be a gate, and there will be a guard there. And if you want to go in and pray, you're welcome to go in and pray. But if you're like, you have a selfie stick and you're doing this kind of stuff, he'll be like, no, 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 this is just for prayer. Like, he can kind of tell. Are you going in for devotion or are you going in just to look around?
That's cool.
Right? So that way, the Blessed Sacrament is there. So in Chartres, it happens to be, this is the chapel that is reposed, right, where he's reposed. And obviously you can tell because of the sanctuary lamp. So it's usually a quieter place. That's why this is a more plain chapel, right? They kind of do that on purpose. They're going to...
Oh my gosh. Remember when in our old chapel at Los we used to have those red things?
Yeah,
Oh, the gate thing.
yeah,
Ever?
They still have those in the tree chapel.
yeah. All right, so
You'll see 'em.
so this is the basic plan
Still use it.
of Chartres, right? We have this transept, and it goes kind of like this. Inside, we have this screen, right? The main altar is here, right? These are the apsidial chapels. So this is where the veil of Our Lady is. This is where the Blessed Sacrament is that you're looking at right here. And you can walk around and you can, view the relics, etc. But they put this screen up. Again, why? For pilgrims. Pilgrims want to be able to walk in and visit the Blessed Sacrament. They want to be able to visit the veil of Our Lady. But in case there's Mass happening, they don't want the pilgrims in the middle here, right? So they build this screen, right? And this was done much later. Not much later, but a couple hundred years later. And it was made out of stone. And it's basically a way to just, this is Mass, this is tourism, this is people devotion, right? It's a way to segment how people are visiting. So here's the screen.
Whoa.
I was thinking like a screen, not like
Yeah, I was
a...
thinking like a brick
Not
wall.
like, I was thinking like a veil.
So that view right here,
This is
we're looking like right there.
this is a lot of money. That's
Okay.
crazy.
And this is all stone.
It's gonna take a lot.
This is all carved out of stone.
Wow.
Maybe like 6
That's
months.
a lot of work.
And so how do you get into it? You can walk all the way around, but there are these little doorways all throughout that you can enter in and out of as well. But it just kind of helps to right, so there's- and all throughout there's these scenes from
How tall is this?
it's about 12 feet tall.
Holy shooter.
So you can see
Okay, if there's a person.
how impressive it is. Now,
There's Joe Schmuckadown.
I should enjoy that.
so this was done basically between 1510 and 1720. Again, that's why it's in a different style. It's in that high Gothic, or it's in that flamboyant Gothic style.
I think they didn't keep the theme going with like the rest of the
Yeah.
cathedral. They just bring in their own.
But they wanted to bring in the best artists, and these are what the artists were doing at the time. The altar itself, the high altar, so
That's an altar.
Oh my.
that's here.
It's like a midget altar.
Holy shoot.
Um,
That is shiny.
It looks
So
like a-
if you're standing here, you're standing about that tall.
That statue
right?
is stunning.
It's tall. This is Baroque. Welcome to the Baroque style,
Oh, so
right?
everything's like,
So everything's now, so this was done later, so now it's done in the Baroque style.
and that's
How
on the,
tall is that altar?
Beautiful.
So if you're standing here, it's, standard, you're about this tall.
It just looks so disproportional from right.
Right.
Looks so short.
It really doesn't fit. And so some of these decorations on the interior of the screen, so you can see the exterior of the screen, the interior is definitely
Is
done
that cloth?
in more of a, no, that's stone.
What?
Game over.
Wait, that
What?
those
That's crazy.
curtains are stone.
That's stone. Different color stone.
What's the point of that?
All right, so the restoration. Restoration of all interior work began in 2009 and was completed in late 2018. That's that article that I gave you. So this is just some depictions. These are just some pictures, and I happened to be there as they're right in the middle of some of this, so I was able to take some decent pictures of before, after. How do they do it?
When did you go?
I was there in 2015 and in 2016. So how are they able to do that? Non-caustic chemicals, right? They're not going to use bleach. They're not going to use acid. They're going to be very, very careful. It takes 10 years, right? It takes 10 years.
They were painting. What were they doing? So they were painting white.
So some of it was being painted. So the parts that were originally painted, they are going to repaint. But some of it that was just original stone, they're just going to be cleaning the stone. So here's a perfect example of before and after. So this is before. This is the original stone underneath it after it's been cleaned, and then they're painting it.
Up top with that big black, with that lots of black paint.
That's the wooden case for the organ.
I knew
Oh
it.
my
She's a
gosh.
whiz.
And there's the pulpit, right?
Oh,
So,
it's so cool.
so the pulpit
You have to
is,
walk that
Where's the
far.
altar?
you have to, the altar is back that way. So you have to walk down. Why? Well, there's a lot of people. So before microphones, you go down about halfway so that everyone can hear you, right? That's pretty standard to have pulpits down part way.
Jeez, Lord.
Here's another example of restoration in progress.
People in the front see the sermon, they just like turn around.
Or not, yeah,
They turn theirs.
They're pretty flexible necks.
There you go.
right? So this is what it looked like originally. This is what it looked like originally. And over time, over 1,000 years, it turns into this, right? And so people are like, oh, this is actually what it's supposed to look like. Obviously, we didn't have photos from
Right,
that.
right.
So restoration is just them like repainting it, like cleaning the material and stuff like that. It's not like them totally remodeling
Whoa,
Right.
How do
Right.
they know that it would look like that?
that white is so pretty.
Because they can tell there are little fragments of white paint still on here. And they can tell, oh, it is white paint. Okay, this section was supposed to be painted. This section was not, etc.
Who decides to restore it? Where do they go with money from?
Essentially, the bishop, right, is a lot of donations, right?
How do they build them?
it. They're borrowing from our like.
This was one of the main things that's in your article. They also restored a statue that had been in there for a very long time, right? So this is the same exact statue.
Wow.
The wood of Our Lady's face and her hands and the wood of Our Lord's face and hands had been damaged by soot and time and devotion of pilgrims touching and kissing, etc. And so they restored it, right? We have a quote from the lady in the article. So read through the article. We have a quote from the lady in the article saying, this is awful. This is a different statue. This is a different Madonna that I've been praying to, right? Is she right? Is she wrong?
They're just paint. It's the
It
same
is
statue.
different.
No, it's not the
Changed
same.
a lot.
But they changed the whole statue, just paint.
The
No,
veil's different.
they restored it. And they, put in wood filler where they needed to and then repainted it to the original, right? So is it changing it or is it restoring it?
Changed it. Look at the crown.
Right, right.
The veil.
All right, so briefly, the crypt was used basically from medieval times. So when a church burns, right, the crypt is usually still okay. And so this is the crypt still today, right? There are even little chapels in the crypt.
Is it a basement?
Uh-huh. This is underneath.
That is so cool.
Is it nice and chilly down there?
It's frigid. It's like being in a cave.
Is this
And so
Wait.
there will still be masses.
Wait, they could do mass like up top and down low.
Hmm. Yeah.
Why would you build a crypt? What's it for?
So these were remnants of some of the original structures of the original church dating way back when.
They built it underground.
And no, that was at the level at the time, and so then they're starting to build up.
Imagine midnight mass.
So parts of it have been restored, other parts have not, right? It goes all the way throughout.
So it's like a 2-story, but the second story is the main
So
part.
just the
Yeah.
earth rolls over it.
Well, over time, yeah, people are building up around it. Right?
Sticking her tongue out.
Yeah,
In church.
we had a,
This is not appropriate.
yeah, that's Allison. Not that Allison. It's a different Allison. Her name's Allison. Whatever, doesn't matter.
I like the guy's boots.
Okay, the labyrinth. There's a labyrinth. This is a very popular part. The labyrinth is basically right around here,
Don't sound like crying or something.
right? So here's the labyrinth. What is a labyrinth and why is it in a church? It is meant to symbolize your journey, basically your journey to salvation, right? You start at one end and you go to the center towards God.
Is there actually a path? Like,
There is a path. You follow it all the way through.
so like you're walking in circles?
Yep. And so you start here, and basically it's like a maze except there's no dead ends. And so basically it is a path that you follow, and it's meant to symbolize your journey through life as you're going into heaven. There is one path. There are no dead ends because there are no dead ends with God. There are no dead ends with your path to salvation.
She's walking out.
This is the way, but the way can be complicated and the way can be narrow. That's the labyrinth. Okay? All right, so
Can I change my art project?
The Milan.
someone please fill Rachel in on the optional homework.
Yeah, Rachel, so what do you want to do if you want extra credit? You do that. You don't have to do it if it's not
It's
necessary.
all-
You do a
You're
crappy
already
job
good,
and you get a 30%.
Yeah, that was very helpful.
You can't take your grade. Okay?
It can help or change your grade a lot.
Yeah, so if you do a crappy job, then it
As someone who's decent, not my son. Okay.
Okay,
Ow,
Rachel, so
Evan. That's fair.
if you want
Wait, Evan,
a
what were
higher
you
grade
doing when
than
they
it
were
does,
here?
even though you